because that's how legacy works. Will you leave your legacy? I'm going to close this morning with a story that I heard a few months ago. One of the reasons I find this story really interesting is because it was told by an acquaintance of mine. He's really a friend, although we haven't seen each other in over 30 years. Would you bring the slide up, please? On the left-hand side of the screen there is a man by the name of Phil Cook. Back when I was in Tulsa and working for the Oral Roberts Ministries, Phil Cook also worked for the ministry. He has continued to be a part of media. He's the founder and CEO of the Cook Media Group. He has gone all over the world helping Christian ministries. He works in Hollywood. He has this pedigree. The Lord took me a different direction. But he told a story recently. I was listening to an interview of him on a podcast. And he told the story, and I've had some communication with Phil over the past couple of years. We've reconnected. He did remember me. I never asked what he remembered. Probably wasn't the most flattering things, but he did remember me. But he told this story in the podcast, and I'm just going to read it to you. Phil said this: years ago, I was in Africa filming a big evangelistic outreach. And I got the opportunity to interview a guy named Nicholas Mnengu. Time magazine called Nicholas Mnengu the Billy Graham of Africa. On the right-hand side of the screen is an old picture of Nicholas Mnengu, the Billy Graham of Africa, according to Time magazine. Time magazine called him this because as an African man himself, he had reached more Africans with the gospel than any man in history. And Phil says, I thought, man, I want to interview this guy. He was in his late 70s then. He's passed away since because this was like 30 years ago. But I got my lights set up. I got my video camera out. I set him down and I said, tell me about this. The Billy Graham of Africa. You've led more Africans to Christ than any man in history. What is it like? Phil said, and he was a super humble guy, and he said, let me tell you a different story. And he told me the story about years before, in fact, many years before, a young couple, a missionary couple. They went to Africa. They were super excited. They really felt called to go and minister in Africa, but apparently they just weren't very good at it. So they preached, and nobody would come. The mission board that was supporting them got peeved because they had nothing to report. Years went by, not a single conversion. They built a church. Nobody came to it. In fact, it was funny, he said, after years in Africa, the only person that they had any kind of relationship at all with was this little kid who helped them carry their gear and stuff. Other than that, not one convert. Mnengu said, finally, after preaching and getting no response whatsoever, their denominational headquarters got embarrassed and said, we've got to call these guys back. This is just killing us. They're no good at all at this. This was a huge mistake. So they called them back. And they were so humiliated and so embarrassed. He said, in fact, this was in the old days when you had to travel by ship. He said after spending most of their adult life in ministry, when they left Africa, the only person that came to see them off was that little kid helping them with their gear. So they got on a boat, and they came back. They were embarrassed and humiliated, and it wasn't but a few years before they both passed away. Absolutely convinced they had been a complete failure. Bill continued the story on the podcast, and he said, and that's when Nicholas Mnengu looked at me and said, but what they didn't know was I was the kid. I was the little kid. God didn't send them over to reach 1,000 people or 100 people or 10 people. He sent them over to reach me And since that time, I have been able to reach more Africans than any man in history. Legacy. Obedience. Even when it doesn't seem like anything is happening. And that's got to be difficult for a couple like this to be on the mission field for years and years and years. I'm sure they checked in with God often. Lord, why are we here? It's not working. That missionary couple left a legacy. His name was Nicholas Nengu, the Billy Graham of Africa. That young lady.